Thank you, Shanaz. And thank you everyone for being here. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for our last session in this series before we go to the holidays and start a new year. I hope everyone is doing okay. And I know more folks will join as we begin the session. Today we're talking about sex workers' rights, and we're so grateful that everyone is here for this very important discussion in our feminist movement. Before we begin, please let me remind you of some accessibility and logistics notes. We have interpretation to Spanish and French, so please select the language you'd like to listen to the meeting in using the globe sign at the bottom right of your screens. You should also select English if you'd like to listen in English. Please don't remain in the off channel if possible. Shanaz and I, Shanaz, if you want to raise your hand also, will be the accessibility and safety coordinators for this call. Oh, and before I jump into those notes, should we pass it to our interpreters to make interpretation announcements in their languages? So I'll pass it to our Spanish interpreters, Maria Angelica and Flavia, to make this announcement in Spanish.
Buenos días, good morning, bonjour. Mi nombre es María Angélica, mis pronombres son ella y ellex, y hoy proveeremos interpretación en español. Si ustedes quieren escuchar la conversación de hoy en español y están conectados desde su computador, abajo a mano derecha de la pantalla ven un globo que dice interpretación, le hacen clic, eligen el idioma que prefieran, y les recomendamos que silencien el audio original o pongan mute original audio. Ahora, si están conectados desde su teléfono, cuando tocan la pantalla de su teléfono en el Zoom, hay 3 puntos abajo a mano derecha, los tocan, escogen interpretación de idiomas, eligen el idioma que prefieren y después tocan hecho o done. También las instrucciones están en el chat si quieren repasarlas. Si tienen algún problema con la interpretación, déjenoslo saber en el chat y con gusto les apoyaremos. Gracias. I now pass the mic on to our interpretation colleagues, French interpretation colleagues.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Il y a donc un service d'interprétation simultanée en français pour cette réunion, ainsi qu'en anglais et en espagnol. Si vous voulez écouter le canal français, cliquez sur le petit symbole en forme de globe en bas de votre écran, choisissez français et vous pouvez choisir de couper l'audio original. Si vous nous rejoignez depuis un téléphone portable, cliquez sur les 3 petits points et plus, interprétation de langue français est terminée. Merci beaucoup, bonne réunion.
Thank you so much to our amazing interpretation team. They do such wonderful language justice work for all of these sessions. So I'll move to our safety notes, and welcome to everyone who's joined us as well. So Shanaz and I will be the accessibility and safety coordinators for this call. You can always write to us in the chat if you have any accessibility, safety, or connection concerns. I'd also like to note that this meeting is only open to women's major group members as participants, but we'll record the first hour of our meeting and share it to our YouTube and social media channels as a resource. The last 30 minutes, so the open discussion at the end, will not be recorded. And in this meeting series, as you can see on the screen, it is also of utmost importance that we cultivate a safe space, centering the demands, voices, and analyses of those most marginalized in our feminist movements. For this reason, discriminatory remarks, hate speech, the denial of self-proclaimed identities, anti-rights discourse, and other forms of discrimination against the folks and groups speaking in these meetings will not be tolerated. If such an incident occurs, the person will be removed from the Zoom platform after 1 warning. So without further ado, I'll pass the floor to our Europe and Central Asia co-organizing partner, Almudena Rodriguez, who will moderate our meeting today. Thank you so much, Almudena.
Muchísimas gracias, Andrea.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Well, first of all, thanks to everyone who are here joining us today. And more than anything, thank you so warmly to our powerful panelists, colleagues, and friends, compañeras that are here with us today. It will be a pleasure to debate and speak with them. Well, first of all, I would like to remind you all to place ourselves in the context. We are in a complex space, critical moments that are characterized by the movement, anti-gender movement and fundamentalism movement, and a movement where the attacks against the lives of Black and trans people is extreme. Also in a context that's characterized by the division of the feminist movement, right? Because the different issues that we can discuss about them now. It's a complex, difficult context where the women's major group, it's quite important to reaffirm ourselves in our fundamental principles, intersectional feminism, collective liberation, and human rights. Human rights for all, human rights for all. We're not leaving anyone behind over here. These are the principles of the women's major groups. We understand that at this time, it's quite important, it's of the utmost importance to listen to the voices, the demands, the priorities, the knowledge, and the strategies, even of the different feminist groups that are most oppressed, most marginalized, but inside the feminist movement, right? Not just outside the movement, but also inside. That's why it's quite important this morning, afternoon, night, that we are all
That's why it's so important that we're all together to reflect, to speak, and to learn from our colleagues that are today representing us here, and regarding sex workers and the rights of sex workers, our demands, like I saying, their work right, their work rights, social protections, all of the human rights that are that they're fighting for right now, and that we are here too in this shared struggle. Like I said, as feminists, we believe in self-determination of all groups and in their ability to be heard and have their demands be listened to. And that's why we're so grateful that today you are here with us. If human rights for us as women's major group, we are very clear on that it will never, that without rights for all, we're not going to have a development, we're not going to have sustainable development. So I'm very happy to have our panelists here to talk and deepen our understanding of what are the structural barriers that sex workers face in regards to their rights to be acknowledged. And very important, how is it that women's major groups, the women's major group, can improve in the collective improvement, in the mutual support, and in this struggle that, like you said, is a shared struggle and a joint struggle. Like my dear colleague Andrea said before, the first hour is going to be an hour of space for our wonderful speakers, our three wonderful panelists. And then the last half hour is not going to be recorded. We are going to have a feminist protection space, a safe space where all participants and all people who are here today will be able to ask questions, debate, reflect. And yeah, I also want to remind you that in today's event, as well as throughout the whole series of events that we have been having during the last months, a feminist illustrator has been joining us. Let me see if I can pronounce her name, Sarina, who will illustrate and is illustrating everything that we express, that we share, and that we reflect on. And now we are going to introduce our three colleagues, our three experts who join us today. First, Elena Eva Renada is here. She belongs to the network of sex workers in Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you for being with us today, Elena. Elena is a sex worker. She started her social activism in 1994, organizing herself against the constant violations against human rights that sex workers were suffering. In 1997, Elena founded the Association of Women of Argentina, and also became one of the founders of the network of sex workers in Latin America and the Caribbean, which includes 14 countries in the whole region. And currently, Elena is the executive aide. She is an international authority, and in 2020, she began being the regional coordinator in Latin America and the Caribbean in the Alliance to Eliminate Stigma and Discrimination related to HIV. Also, in 2008, she was highlighted as an important character an influential character by the by the legislature of Argentina, and she received uh, an, uh, an award because of her work in human rights. Thank you so much, Elena, for sharing with us today. I also want to introduce our colleague and our friends in Women's Major Group, Sarina Sanchez, who belongs to the European Alliance for the Rights of Sex Workers. Sabrina is a trans woman, a sex worker originally from Mexico who has lived in Barcelona here in Spain for many years, and now she has left us to go to colder places, but we still love her very much. And previously, she was the coordinator of the convener of the board of directors of Europe. And finally, we have Liz Hilton from Empower. Liz Hilton is from Empower in Thailand. Empower is a Thai sex worker organization founded by sex workers and 36 years ago. And since then, over 50,000 sex workers have been part of Empower. Liz joined Empower in the year 1992. And here we have our three experts and wonderful panelists. Now we are going to start the discussion. As I was saying, this first portion is time for to listen, reflect, and learn from our experts. We're going to ask you 3 questions throughout this time. For each question, we're going to have 10 minutes. So just please have it be a dialogue, a discussion, a shared space. And we're going to ask the first question. And any of you, if you want to start, you can just raise your hand, or you can directly just open your mic and speak. The first question, I don't know if you can see the shared screen. If not, I'll just ask the question directly. Colleagues, compañeras. And our first question is, how are sex workers experiencing injustices and human rights violations across the United Nations spaces? And how is this connected to broader struggles for bodily autonomy and the systemic issues of patriarchy? That will be the first question. I'll leave it. Oh, I'll leave it open. The floor is yours, and if you want to start, thank you. Well, I'm gonna start because I'm older, okay? Okay, so first, I would like to thank you for this space. Honestly, I'm so happy. We are, as a Latin American network, very happy for this space. So our network says hello to everyone. I'm very happy to be with colleagues, with Liz, because I met her when they did the World AIDS conference in Thailand. I met her there, and I was in awe of her work and her organization. Sabrina, I don't know her personally, but we know each other through Zoom, through chat. So I'm very happy for this space. Thank you, Andrea, for you all. So I thought about this answer a lot. How, and also we're very happy about this space because this space has been denied to us, very much so. It has been denied to us for sex workers because very often the people some of the people who work within the United Nations are also abolitionists. So within their they put their personal positions before their institutional positions. So they don't allow us to advance. And then they answer with this thing that we are helping the patriarchy. So what we say is, sorry, it's been over 30 something years that sex workers are organized. We think for ourselves, and we are not working for the patriarchy. I would say it's the other way around. It is the other way around. That very often when they place barriers before us, it, when we present reports about human rights violations, for example, like when we put a name, a first and a last name to what I'm saying, for example, the CIHIN, which is the Commission of Women and Human Rights in Washington. However, very often it's more important and they give more value to the women who are there, who are abolitionists, than to us. So we tell them, what else do we need to do? Today, there's a bunch of organizations around the world who are organized by ourselves. We decide for ourselves. Many of us didn't go to school, but you need to start giving value to knowledge. For example, the university and academia has knowledge, but nobody can tell us what we ourselves need for our lives. We show the world that thanks to being organized, we brought the HIV epidemic down. Thanks to us being organized, we have saved the lives of many compañeras or colleagues. Thanks to being organized, we, in these 2 ferocious years of pandemic, we put our bodies in the line and we found food for our colleagues because there wasn't a government that looked at sex workers and had public policy for us. So that's why we tell all the women who call themselves feminists, excuse me, you should rethink yourself. You should rethink what is feminism really. To let us speak so that truly the 2030 agenda is made a reality throughout the world and that nobody is left behind. For that, you need to let us advance once and for all, right? You can keep your thoughts to yourself, but we have our own voice. It's not just 1 or 2, there's hundreds and millions of sex workers who are demanding sex workers laws, acknowledgement of sex work as work. I'll stay here.
Sabrina, habías levantado la mano.
Sí, sí
Wonderful,
tenía.
Elena. I think, Sabrina, you raised your hand. Yes, I have raised my hand, and I am completely in agreement with what Elena Eva said. Indeed, I have little experience as far as the United Nations goes, but at a regional level of the European Parliament, that's where my experience is, and we can use this as well. There's another example. I was present this Monday in a hearing in the Liberties of Women's Committee. The Sweden and French committees, they want to impose their own agenda, the sexual exploitation, in their words, any type of exchange based sex exchange with money, for them it's exploitation. And this is this constant issue of wanting to associate our work with gender violence, when indeed for our comrades, this has been the work that removed them for situations of gender-based violence in many cases. So you realize that these courses that say, we're going to speak with all women, but they put you up there and they don't listen to you. In other words, we say it's a question of like labor rights, the laws in New Zealand. We provide all of these different examples, and like a German socialist lady from a specific group, they are even more, they're not as nice. They even compare them to the people who are like right wing. We had, how do you say this? We had the different anal situations because of this. And they were telling me this as a trans woman, and I was professionally, I don't have any issues anally. So you see that it's a moral situation. It's a moral question as far as the conception of sex, having it be it all horrible and it's not this wonderful thing. It doesn't seem like it's this way. So it's putting again this example with children. Imagine exploited children. It's just that we're not defending that. And they were telling me this straight up. I'm sorry, I'm speaking too fast. I'm going to slow down. They were telling me directly, they were saying, well, the lady who promotes prostitution, as if I'm not promoting anything. It is what it is. We need to regulate it. In other words, if we close our eyes very hard and we say it's not work, it's not work, it's not work, it's not going to go away. Giving millions to the forces of security so that they come after us, they're not going to avoid it, because if they don't give us the millions, if we had 2,000 euros a month simply for existing, maybe we would contemplate what to spend our lives in. But even then, there's millions of people and millions of people in the diversity who work as sex workers because of a need. It's quite a violent situation. There's spaces that are quite violent. As a trans person, for me, it's a double whammy, because in all those groups, I'm sure that Elena Eva, she has been in those meetings with 500 women, and there's 1 or 2 sex workers. Maybe it's her and maybe another one person. For me, it's about the same, but being trans, it's the same situation. I'm either the only one or maybe the director of the ILGA board, so that she considers herself being trans, but that's it. There are spaces that, these are spaces we're not welcome. It's like a bubble where people have lives that they don't relate to people. A lady, European deputy, is telling us that they want to glamorize this because it's work. What world do you live in? Your work, not the rest of everyone's work. It's not even glamorized. It's not even the people who clean in the parliament. So it's the conception of how these thought is. It's this whitewashing of this thought and how it impacts. And this version, as far as of the sex coming from the left, it fits as far as the people on the right, their question that's transphobic that they've had, it fits in. So we also have parties like the feminist Spanish party. They have press conferences with the extreme right. So for me, it has been quite enlightening this last, the CAW. There were feminists who were the same thing that Putin was saying as far as gender goes, about trans women, having a manifest about rights, natural rights of women, those who have ovaries and uterus, and that's the only true women. They're really heavy spaces. The United Nations, it's like the meme of the flow of water and like the stopping of the water. Unfortunately, is the organism that exists, is the framework that exists. But if you analyze all of the issues discussed at the United Nations, I mean, the nation states exist, right? So it's a little bit of that. So I would like to stop now to give space to my other comrades. Thank you so much. Almudena says, thank you so much. Now, Liz, you raised your hand. Liz, you can speak now, Liz.
Yeah, thanks. I agree totally with my other friends about the difficulties that the UN has in working with sex workers. the reason I'm here speaking tonight, actually, I should say, is the Thai sex workers who run Empower are all busy selling sex. So they sent me. We're really quite angry with one group of UN at the moment, is UN Women. I don't know whether you guys know or not, but in October 2019, just before COVID fell on top of us, the UN Women, they got a petition with 1,400 signatures only. And they just took the position that now they have abandoned sex workers to violence from the state and the police. They have said that they're going to take no position on the criminalization of sex work. They will be neutral. And everyone knows that neutral means you're with the side of power. At Empower, I'm just going to turn my camera on. I hope you can see this. We've made some small handkerchiefs. Can you see? It says UN Women Can't Make Us Cry. And we're using this as a cheeky campaign. And we've already sold more handkerchiefs to supporters than the 1,400 signatures that they decided to make their position on. And what Elena was saying is very true. UN spaces and sex workers and all other grassroots people trying to access the UN space depends on the person in power in that space. So when we have good friends, good customers, good UN people, we can move a little bit. And then we get someone new and we're thrown back to the dark ages like Sabrina was talking about. And I think that the trouble is for UN Women has abandoned and betrayed sex workers, but we're still under the United Nations Office of Drug and Crime. What are we doing there? Why are we sitting with the terrorists and the arms dealers? We don't know why they're still controlling our lives. I think that the other thing that doesn't often happen when people are discussing is the issue of class is often ignored. And I think that really plays out in you have careers and they're mostly higher sector people. And all the institutions and ways of working of the UN favor academics. The whole system doesn't favor grassroots people. And that doesn't only apply to sex workers, it applies to the indigenous people, to workers, to all kinds of people that the UN system has no capacity to work with. And they keep trying to build our capacity. I don't know why. Our capacity is built. We're ready, we're already left. But they still haven't changed their methods of working with different communities and grassroots people. Yeah, I think that was what people says. If someone in there likes us, then the space will be okay for as long as they're there, and then the door can close quickly when they leave. And if you want handkerchiefs, please tell me. We're happy to sell you a handkerchief so the UN women don't make you cry. That can be me. That's me done.
Muchísimas gracias, Liz. No, yo
Thank you so much, Liz. Now, to close this first round of questions, it is true that you have highlighted very important things. Elena, you were saying it clearly. For sex workers, you have been organized for many years with a collective organization that is very powerful, with knowledge and strategies that the rest of feminists should also follow in many different spaces. And what Liz was just saying, what is what is legitimate knowledge? Who has knowledge? Who has the knowing? United Nations has to begin to understand that situated and live knowledge is maybe even more powerful to transform systems. Thank you all for this first round. And now I'm gonna ask the second question, which is not an easy question, but you are powerful. And now we would like for you to please tell us about what are the key demands for sex workers' rights across multilateral spaces, both in local spaces and in international spaces. What are your key demands? And now, Elena, would you like to start? I give the mic to you. Well, I would like for the others to start, but Sabrina says, I can start if you want. Okay, go, go, go. Yeah, so we switch a bit. I think that the standards are so low. We are in in such a situation where rights are non-existent, especially with the pandemic. The ones who were able to survive, were worse than before. Colleagues are having issues and are behind in rent for months and just trying to survive. So it's such a low standard. But we ask for the most basic thing, dialogue. Institutions have this thinking of that, okay, they need to to reintegrate us into society as if we were in prison or something, but they don't know that we have been a part of society for a long time ago. We pay taxes too. We also bring our kids to school. We also vote. I mean, but no, they have this image of that we are women who they take us from containers from one ship to the other, and we're like this, and we don't know anything, and we don't participate, and we're just waiting for very blunt women to come and rescue us. So dialogue is the first thing, for them to truly listen to us, to pay attention to us, not just for them to sit us down, um, and just say, oh, okay, yeah, we heard you, but we're not gonna listen to you. And that continues being a part of sitting in the decision-making table, a table where we are taken into account at in the moment that a politician wants to bring legislation on prostitution, for them to take us into account first, because surely, for the parents associations and for scholars, they take them into account when a law it applies to them. Now we are the only sector in which a law changes our lives and our sectors completely, but we're not consulted about it. So we want the same working rights. We don't want for our rights to be reduced, but rather for all of us to be thriving and going up. We are the first canary in the mine, right? If we fall, if we already are in -20 level, well, the people who are getting to 0, if we don't go up, the other sectors also, it seems like they will continue suffering or allowing abuses. So we need to all be pushing, like Elena was saying, for 30 from 30 years ago, we were um, the first line of contention, of support against the HIV pandemic epidemic, when the United States was letting everyone die. So I think this is a very basic demand, dialogue, and also the thinking and the realizing that 25 years later, Switzerland is not right. Switzerland makes many mistakes. It's not the moral north of anything. And I don't know for how long they're going to want to continue, for how long they're going to be continue thinking that it's going to work. But I think that 22 years is long enough to prove that criminalizing is not the answer. Now in New Zealand, it's going to show that it does work. It showed throughout the pandemic, it showed that it does work. And Elena Eva also says that there wasn't a single country with a specific policy. And New Zealand didn't have to do it because it already had workers' right, and it wasn't even necessary in this case. And the rest, I absolutely agree. No government was concerned specifically to say, okay, these folks who take their kids to school, pay taxes, they contribute, who are part of society, well, we need to support them. And that would be all. Thank you so much, Sabrina. Now I pass the mic to Liz. I see that you raised your hand. We're listening, Liz.
Okay. Yeah, I think that when what Sabrina is saying for the current situation is, of course, is true everywhere. But we've been through disasters before, and we know there'll be other pandemics to come. So they really need to fix it. If you ask sex workers across Southeast Asia, I've been here about 30 years now, and sex workers will say the biggest problems are police and stigma. And you hear it again and again, the police have to be gotten out of the lives of sex workers, and that means law reform. And there's no way around it, because the criminalization of sex work is at the root of many, many other problems that flow on for that. Sex workers don't get labor rights because what criminals get labor rights? Sex workers don't get social protection because what criminals get social protection? Employers aren't made to do the right thing by their workers because they're not employers, they're mafia guys. The police extort money and sex across the world because of the root of this law. Going into spaces and trying to have acceptance as mothers and workers and women and all the other things that sex workers have gets blown away because you start out as a criminal. So of course there's all the other stigmas that you carry as a woman, as a migrant, as a working class person, Indigenous, you carry all those other transgender, Black, you carry all the other stigmas with you, but sex workers carry an extra one of criminal. And that seems to be the one that should be the easiest to fix because you don't have to do anything. You have to just stop doing something. You have to just stop criminalizing sex work. And then sex workers that have been organizing, I think the first organization was 45 years ago in France. And then everyone has come along since. Nothing has changed in what sex workers are demanding in terms of the law. And it's absolutely shameful that we're still saying it on our own, that we still have in the UN spaces, ILO, IOM, they'll all say it behind closed doors in their meetings, or they'll clap when we say it, but it stops there. There's no push from anyone apart from sex workers to get the police and state violence out of their lives. Yeah. I should say the end.
¿Ya? Bien. Entonces,
Good.
primero,
Okay, so first, well, I agree with my compañeras. We need to have spaces where we're heard, okay? That is the utmost importance. We need that all organisms, I'm talking about governments, bilateral organisms, human rights organisms, everyone has to read what we produce, the different documents, knowledge that we share. This year, we have generated more than 10 reports in different instances. For example, we presented in front of the NEPD in the United Nations. We presented in front of the Convention of Human Rights, another organism. We create tons of investigations about our reality because even 15 years ago, all of the knowledge that there was about us, it was about our vaginas. How much syphilis did we have? How much gonorrhea did we have? And that's it. And even today, even up to this day, because the only organism that finances any one of our initiative, it's ONU SIGAN and PNO, because about ONU, United Nations women, we are tired of sending them proposals, because you know what it takes for us to come up with this project. And they didn't even tell us why did it not get approved, because all of these years that United Nations exists, it's been more than 10 years, they could have told us, okay, fix this, present this again, but not even that. They are so disrespectful that they don't even answer us, tell us this. It's a barrier that we have, right? But this happens in the whole wide world, that they only want to work on HIV/AIDS, and they don't want to work on human rights, women's rights, self-esteem, mental health. And we need to work with our comrades, with our compañeras with mental health, because after the epidemic, there are so many people who don't have access to the vaccine. If they got the vaccine, they got one of the shots. They have a police force that's horrible. So these different spaces, national spaces, and also worldwide spaces, and also this meeting that will take place every March, that the CSW, why don't we come up with a forum at a worldwide level? And then we all sit, we don't want the person who cleans in the United Nations. We want our governments there. We want our health ministers there. We want them there we want the United Nations women listening to us and taking away the prejudices and understanding for once and for all that we look for the recognition of sexual work for our comrades that are organized, for our comrades who are elders, they are in this work. They need to understand for once and for all that one thing is human trafficking and labor exploitation, and we are not obliging any comrade to be recognized as a sex worker. It's a process, right? But we need to divide things, because as long as we are not dividing human trafficking, we for sure, with all of this repression that is going on with the Sweden government, with the French government, and all the things that are going down in Spain at this time, everything that they're accomplishing, anything that they're accomplishing is to be out in the dark. As long as this is out in the dark, there is more human trafficking. That is as clear as water. If they could study us, if they could give us money so that we can, for real, have investigations or reports, because investigations are quite expensive, so that we can show how much damage is created, this huge confusion about human trafficking and sexual work, not just to people who are being trafficked, but also sex workers. And if anyone considers themselves a feminist, they should start taking a look to this. Yes. Yes, bravo, bravo, Elena Eva. I think what you're saying is key. This confusion between human trafficking and sex work, I think it's something politicized. There are interests there, economic interests, political interests. Yes, completely. There are investigations, at least the ones that are taking place in Spain. It shows the position, it shows what human trafficking is, their values, and they don't want to understand it. And that's a key component, what you're saying, to occupy those spaces and have them listen, have them hear what the reality is, and to take that place of the United Nations. It's quite patriarchal place, but we need to occupy it. Sabrina, you wanted to add something else? I'm so sorry. I wanted to add that, yes, effectively, it's a strategy of like controlling the border, right? Which it has a base that we already know. It's a colonized, racist base. It's quite easy to say, right? We're going to stop human trafficking, right? Where does human trafficking come from? Well, from outside, because the demand is in Europe, right? That's what they say for the people who are here. There's always there's always demand everywhere. It doesn't have anything to do with that. It has to do that this little corner of the world, it's a little bit safe as far as like citizenship safety. Me as a Mexican, I can say the difference between what it's like to be in always watching your shoulder and the other way where like you don't have to be without that stress. Those are part of the reasons why we migrate, but they're trying to control that migration. We know we're seeing what's happening between the different places on the borders, in the tensions at the border in Poland and the different encampments, all of these different migrants who are coming to Europe. We also have the border between like Mexico and the United States. Well, but I'm here in Europe, so that's what I'm talking about, the Europe border. And all of these restrictions, these people shouldn't come, these people shouldn't come over here. And also to keep white Europe white, because people will continue reproducing. Well, y'all are not reproducing yourselves. Let's get other people to be part of the population. But effectively, it's the business of the police enforcement and all of the different things that the police has, from rubber bullets, which we've seen, the construction of fences. This is business. And we're talking about, one more time, the scapegoat is the trafficking, the mafia. They're quite worried about human trafficking, but honestly, those people know people who have domestic workers at home, and they also remove them. They take them their documentation, and they're also in human trafficking situations, and they also suffer from sexual abuse, but it seems that that doesn't exist. So when they're talking about these human trafficking spaces, they use the word sex trafficking. It's as if the rest are not being trafficked and they don't need rights and help and assistance, and that's all. Very well. Thank you so much, Sabrina. Let's switch it up to, if you would not like to add anything else, let's ask the last question. We are at the last 10 minutes before finishing this first hour. The last question we would like to ask you all is, how can the global feminist movement and concretely here, the women's major group, how can we better support and focus sex workers' struggle? How can we support in a real effective way this fight? And whoever would like to start, please and thank you. Elena says, well, that is my favorite question. All of the different questions were good, but this is the question that I was waiting with eagerness. How can you support the movement? Well, first of all, not putting us barriers. I think that they should have a more political position as far as sex work goes. As a group, that's what I believe. And we would love for this to take place, for this to happen, that you could, the same way that Amnesty International did it, and we are also working with IPPF at the national worldwide level, because they will launch this. It's not like here, yes, over there. No, I was going to say this. I have been in spaces, us as like the Latin American community, we are in CEPAL, OVEA, but in the feminist spaces, they are the hardest for us. Yes, when we get together at a regional level here in Latin America, we create, I mean, we work with the government, but with civil society gets together and we develop documents to read it in front of the governments. So we come up with agreements. Every time more of us need to go to guarantee that at least one of us is in one group, because after that, you create more synthesis in each group. And you know what, even though we take 10 people and the 10 of us are in the different tables and we present our position, when the final document comes up, what we said disappears. So many times my comrade Lucy and Arminda are here. How you can see I have quite a strong character. I need to get angry. I need to get angry so that the paragraph that we say, it's included. So now, for once and for all, that needs to stop happening. Because if the feminist movement says that they're feminist,
Ahora, Elena, creo que ahora se te escucha mejor.
No, que
sorry, I think we can hear you better now. Okay, no, what I was saying is that if the feminist movement says that they're feminists, they need to let us be ourselves, our position, and to understand, one more time, understand that all of these positions, all of this opposition that takes place, not only the global and regional level, it's also at the national level. Here in Argentina, we have the hope that for once and for all, there was created a ministry of the women, but our minister is an abolitionist. The person after the president is an abolitionist. The minister of the largest province and most important in Argentina, it's an abolitionist. So we say, well, why do we want a ministry of the women if honestly it's for some of them? Because it's also a classist situation that happens often. When you go to the spaces, you can see that the leadership, the executive directors of the United Nations, they speak with the women of high class, with academia. And very few times do they sit and talk with us. We need to ask for meetings. I remember that 2 years ago, we went to Chile, and the comrade, the compañera, we appreciate her, the executive director of the United Nations. We have to run after her for 3 days. And she met with us standing up. She said, oh, I only have 1 minute. She had committed herself that for once and for all, she had said, I can't speak about abortions. I cannot speak about sex work. That's how she said it. So I say, well, just say women, people who self-determine sex workers, that we were at another event and we are never mentioned. So when you're not mentioned, you don't exist. And that, for real, it's a real pain that one woman or women from the feminist movement, from the feminist world, they're not knowing. They are making invisible sex workers. Maybe it comes from sexist people. We don't expect this, but from women, it's quite hurtful. That's what we expect, that to be heard, that for them to understand that we are not promoting human trafficking, that they understand for once and for all, that they take out the stigmas for once and for all, that myth that many times, there are more myths than realities about us and facts about us. So if we were heard, for sure, maybe we won't be able to achieve, maybe we won't be able to coincide on everything, but we don't want to be killed anymore. We don't want to be raped anymore. We don't want anymore. Today at 3 p.m., the Latin American network will introduce a report of all of the different numbers of comrades that all of these years were raped by the police. We were destroyed. So the negation of the word, the negation, those are the consequences. And I suppose that indeed, if we are feminists, we don't want this. We don't want an indigenous person to be killed. We don't want a Black person to be killed. We don't want any of this to continue happening. Yes?
Bravo. Thank you so much, Elena Eva. Liz, I think you raised your hand. Please, the mic is yours.
Yeah, that is a hard act to follow, Elena. It's very, everything true. It just reminded me that it's leaving us out of the report is not just in one country or one region. It also happens here. So now we take an extra sex worker and she sits with whoever's doing the reporting to try and make sure it goes on in the first place. The other thing that happens for us is we are the last to speak. Usually the government people and important people have gone before it's sex workers' turn to speak. The question of what can the women's major group do? Elena likes this question. It's a question I find really hard because I don't know what people have done already. And we talked about it today at Empower. I said, what are we going to say? And what sex workers of Empower wanted to say to the women's major group is speak up, come out of the closet. Don't just agree with us in safe spaces, but be brave and support what sex workers are saying when it's not so safe. Whether it's talking to the state, talking to other feminists, talking to other feminists who you respect but are abolitionists. If you're not speaking out along with us, then it's, I don't know what else. Yeah, I don't know. The support's not real otherwise, unless we see others out there with us.
Sabrina, creo que quieres añadir algo.
Sabrina,
No.
I think you want to add something? Sabrina says, yes, I didn't know if she had finished. Yes, go ahead. I have very few things to add after my two colleagues' opinions, because they are perfect. Maybe also add, it's also something that as a trans and sex worker woman, it's something that I always try to say. If you in your organization, if you're in contact with people with feminist organizations, with human rights organizations, people who may have the power of having sex workers as a part of the team in the within power in the organizations, and even staff who makes decisions in the organizations, taking them into account in their strategies in the organizations. For me, I love to share this work in women's major group, and I'm sure that there's other colleagues who also want to have access to these spaces, who also want to participate, and who very often don't find a place, right? Maybe there's feminist organizations who are pro, but there's none like us who is working there, right, constantly. This type of inclusion in the workplace also helps for us to know each other in a personal way, because always, the also working together helps us understand situations that others may have lived. And then when it comes to maybe if we want to create programs, create projects, we know already firsthand that we have the firsthand expertise. And as part of permanent staff in organizations, or even a board of directors in an organization, right? So they know how to approach this community and to know the issues that we face. Almudena says yes. I don't know if Elena Eva or Liz, you want to say something else before the next question? Elena Eva says yes. Yes. I would like to hear Mabel, because the mother is here. I see her. So now we're gonna go to questions. So now, before going to the next page, I wanted to add something, and it is to remember that the women's major group has their principles and their values, which all members, if they want to be members, that they have to adhere to and sign. And therefore, it is a group that it is pro rights. It's a group that understands and shares all the struggle of all the political subjects, and cannot understand feminism if not through the acknowledgement of that we are all political subjects. And that is the women's major group. And also the role of women's major group to enable for the voices, knowledges, strategies, struggles, and resistance from all of the feminists throughout the world, from any space, is present in the United Nations, in any field. And now